Hello and welcome to Systems Reimagined. Today I'm joined by Samuel and Rachel, as always, and we're going to unpack some of the biggest news stories of this past week. We got a little bit busy and sidetracked because of the interview we released on the weekend, but we're all good. We're all good. We'll cover it today. So we're going to start off with PMQs, then discuss universal credit, trade deals with genocidal regimes, Cineworld and Unilever's disastrous policies, I guess you could call it. Russia reports, Twitter's new birdwatch scheme situation. Give an update on the Ugandan election following the coverage we did previously. And finally, some of the probably the biggest news of the week is the inauguration and some of Biden's first orders. So with that being said, I believe it's Rachel who's going to kick us off with some PMQ's analysis.
Yes, so we saw a virtual appearance from Keir Starmer today at PMQs. He was quick to highlight the stark statistic that the UK reached yesterday of 100,000 deaths. And he said that the question on everyone's lips this morning is why? Why do we have the highest death toll in Europe? So Johnson was quick to avoid the question in many aspects and highlight the things that the government are succeeding on at the moment, for example, the vaccination programme. But he really failed to answer this key question of why. And I think Starmer has done quite well there in picking up on the specific kind of feeling in the nation. A lot of people that aren't maybe necessarily super involved with politics or the course of the pandemic or, the latest like SAGE reports, they're very confused as to why and as to how this number has been reached. This also led on to Boris Johnson saying that there were no straight answers, that there was nothing, no kind of quick fix solution that could be in store. But Starmer again came back and highlighted how waiting and watching certainly doesn't work, and that seems to be the policy that Johnson has been adopting.
Yeah, sorry, just real quick. I'll also say
No.
with Boris Johnson when he did when he issued a statement saying he did like whatever he no like he did the best he could with or they did the best they could with the death toll, which obviously if you've been paying a little bit of attention you would know like there's certain things which he definitely could have done. I think Rachel, you mentioned it a couple episodes back when you said that if we locked down 1 week earlier we could have saved what is it, 20,000 lives or 10,000 lives. I forgot how much it was, but regardless, we didn't have to. The reality is we didn't have to reach this point, and him saying that I feel like is quite disingenuous. But yeah, sorry to interrupt there.
No, I agree completely. That is the thing, this kind of dither and delay that we've seen from the government. It has cost so many thousands of lives. And going on from this, Johnson again kind of trying to get back on his footing and highlighted how the vaccination programme has now seen 6.9 million people vaccinated, which is obviously an incredibly good number and something that's very much needed. But he was quite cautious in highlighting that February 15th kind of date that they've got in mind as to when all of the most clinically vulnerable will have been vaccinated by. He was cautious to say that target could only be met if the supplies were there. We've seen quite a few issues with the kind of supply chains of receiving those vaccinations. He also went on to highlight other so-called positives in the response, but Starmer, as the clip will highlight.
Mr. Speaker, throughout this pandemic, it's been the habit of the opposition first to support one approach and then to attack it and to twist and to turn. It was only recently that the Shadow Transport Secretary was saying that quarantine measures should be relaxed, Mr. Speaker. We have one of the toughest regimes in the world. We ask people to test 72 hours before they fly. They have to produce a passenger locator form, or otherwise they're kicked off the flight. They already have to quarantine for 10 days. And my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, will be setting out later today, if he care to wait for that. Even tougher measures for those red list countries where we are particularly concerned about new variants. And again, I think what the people of this country want for us now to do is to come together as a government, as a parliament, and to get this thing done.
Was keen again to talk about the international arrival situation. Now, Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, has been keen to highlight how the borders are far too open. Ironically, the Conservative government have always been quite keen to close the borders to refugees and immigrants from Europe, but on this issue, they're really keeping them open for international travel. Now, the travel industry has been saying since March that the introduction of quarantine hotels is only a good idea, that it's something that needs to happen. And if we look, as we have in the past, to New Zealand and Australia and other countries that have had a much better track record in handling the epidemic, they have had similar quarantine hotels from the beginning. So it's in no way a novel idea, but it's something, again, that the UK have been very slow to even kind of consider, never mind put plans into achieving, as we are now seeing. Johnson said that the negative PCR test that travellers need to submit 72 hours before arrival, along with a passenger locator form, was adequate enough. I'm not sure if these comments will come back to bite him more than they already have done, as we do probably see quarantine hotels coming in more and more. He has also highlighted, this was just following PMQs, how schools won't reopen until March. This is, again, in a climate where children's education is suffering most. Starmer again highlights today how, kind of broadband inequality and poverty is a key detrimental impact on children's learning. And I'm sure that kind of broadband policy, or certainly speak of, is something we'll get onto in a little while. But it's obviously not good news for parents or for children, really, that March milestone. And that, again, is dependent on supplies and vaccination targets being met. The final thing on PMQs, as I'm sure the clip will highlight,
Mr. Speaker, that made those vaccines possible. And he actually attacked the vaccine task force. I know you want me to sit down, Mr. Speaker. I don't want to make this point because I tried to make it last week and you saw me. He even attacked the vaccine task force for spending £675,000 on an effort to discover whether hard-to-reach groups would take a vaccine. And I really cannot think of a better investment right now of public funds. And I hope that later on this afternoon, the right honourable gentleman may think of apologising for what he did and for that attack on the vaccine task force. Mr. Speaker, they can go on, and the right honourable gentleman can go on making his party political points. We will go on, with or without his help, in taking this country forward, fighting the pandemic and getting coronavirus down.
Was the £675,000 spent on the vaccination task force to reach those kind of furthest away families, which I think is Johnson nicely saying those that have been deprived and economically disadvantaged for many years, and the research around whether they would be willing to take the vaccine. Now, obviously, that's not a huge sum of money in the grand scheme of things, but he was keen to highlight how Starmer was against that. There wasn't too much context, whether Starmer was just kind of highlighting other more beneficial ways to spend that money, or if it was something that he was really, really against, although I don't particularly see a reason why he would have been. So overall, it was an interesting PMQs, but I do think it will be overshadowed by the statement that Johnson delivered to the Commons directly after with that school opening date.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack in that PMQs, and I found it really interesting in general, especially the more broadband comments surrounding it. Keir Starmer obviously highlighted that 1/3 of families didn't have I'm pretty sure he said adequate supplies to have at home schooling, etc. And so but as I said previously, I feel like Keir Starmer, when he's saying these things, he's not providing a robust groundbreaking plan or really coming out in any really substantive, strong way, providing an alternative to Boris Johnson. And so, this idea that you can just be these families, they don't have enough technology, and you just like acknowledge the problem, but then you're not really coming out strong for it. I feel like is really frustrating. First of all, because like he's like identifying all the right areas, but then he's just not being he's not having a great finishing kind of section on that. Like he's not really providing anything concrete, which is really frustrating. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, not much else to add, but yeah, I really agree with Rachel. I think the why really speaks to people across the spectrum within the UK, even people who are not exactly political and follow that politics really closely. I think, looking at the news every night, you can see like the UK is consistently ranked at the top in how badly they've handled it, and I think a lot of people are just wondering the why, why has it come to this? And I think Starmer did pretty well to emphasize that why. But as you said, Benji, I think it is a big issue for Starmer that he hasn't come through with any concrete policies and alternatives to address this crisis, And so it makes it pretty easy for Boris to say, what would you do? You haven't come up with anything. So I think that's a real challenge for Starmer, and trying to come up with an alternative to how he dealt with it. And I think there are plenty of examples out there to show how successful policy can be. But yeah, as you said, for example, with the broadband, someone like Corbyn, who a lot of people don't like, he had an alternative before the coronavirus even was a thing, and now people are looking at that idea and they're considering that as a possibility. He was once considered, they called it broadband communism, but now now they're considering that policy. So that definitely speaks to Starmer's lack of policy ideas. And yeah, even when important things like schooling and stuff like that, I think he definitely needs to come up with something to counter what Boris is doing, because that'll make it even more effective, his criticism, if he offers an alternative. Because if he doesn't have much, then it's easier for Boris to deflect on the criticisms, So
also, yeah. I will say, in terms of the why as well, just building onto that, I feel like Keir Starmer could have been more aggressive in his approach. Like I think he could have. I mean, I feel like doing a comparison or something to a different country could have been valuable probably over there. Be like, especially when it came with regards to the discussion about the COVID hotels, like, why haven't we doing this since day one? Like, why haven't we doing it? These things, you can just really compare it to other countries and really make them look bad. The conservative Boris Johnson in this case. And so, yeah, I think that's probably one thing I'd like to emphasize there, like that he could have done better. And also, I will say, Rachel, you mentioned schooling as well, which is also a really big deal right now. And the idea that I feel like Starmer he doesn't have like a huge leg to stand on over here, right? Like he came out just as late as Boris Johnson to with regards to closing schools and stuff like that. Didn't want to come out in support of the NEU. And so if Boris Johnson has like a lot of ammunition there to criticize him, but Boris Johnson is, however, still in denial of the idea that schools are unsafe, as was discussed in PMQs, which is kind of ironic because, well, I don't know. I don't know if we should get into this whole thing, but like if schools were really that safe, like why are they closed right now? So yeah. Anyway, I'll pass it back to you, Rachel, if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a slippery slope to get back down the debate around whether schools are safe or not. But yeah, ultimately it speaks volumes that they're not open at the moment. He was quick to critique Starmer for saying that he was in favour of schools reopening as soon as kind of possible in terms of safety. But that's quite a legitimate position for him to hold. So yeah, I think I just echo what you both said in regard to PMQs there.
I also have one more thing to add, like this idea of Keir Starmer having U-turns or being like a flip-floppy, just being like a flip-floppy guy with regards to policy, also really annoys me because I mean, like, one of the biggest headlines of 2020 was how many U-turns the Conservative government did. Like I just like not the audacity, because like I don't like Keir Starmer either that much, right? But like you're just a bit delusional if you say that he's more inconsistent than the own government who's had multiple U-turns with like on things which like as basic as free school meals, which also sorry don't wanna, like we'll get to universal credit in a moment, but free school meals I believe is being continued through the half term. Or something along those lines. I'm pretty sure I saw it today. So that's also a positive headline.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think just kind of quickly coming back on that, I'm in by no means a huge Starmer fan, and it is a very difficult line to kind of balance between critiquing the government but also not just jumping on every policy that they have and kind of offering a negative withdrawal. But that does definitely result in sometimes him being seen as this kind of like indecisive, flip-flopping, sit on the fence kind of guy. So it's certainly a difficult balance, and whether he strikes it correctly, I'm not too sure. But there's certainly time to perfect that before another election.
Yeah.